Adrenaline is a Mech Thomas perk that heals you exactly one health state and grants a 3-second speed boost whenever the exit gates are powered. This is one of the oldest perks in Dead by Daylight, as it has been a part of the game ever since its very release back in 2016, and therefore it's no wonder that Adrenaline has had quite the history regarding all of the changes that have been made to it. But yet it has remained to be one of the most popular survivor perks throughout all of this time. So in this video we're going to take a look at the evolution of the Adrenaline perk in DBD, and without any further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so during the early days of Dead by Daylight, the developers had a design philosophy that is fairly strange by today's standards, but at that time it actually made quite a bit of sense. See, some perks used to have different abilities depending on their tier. For instance, No One Escapes Death only provided the ability to insta-down survivors at tier 3, since at the lower tiers it simply increased your speed and lowered your attack cooldown. Another example is Balanced Landing, which by default just reduced your stagger by 50 or 75%. It was only when you upgraded the perk to tier 3 that it started providing a speed boost after falling. And even then it lasted just 2 seconds, while it had a cooldown of 60. And so Adrenaline was also no stranger to this design principle. See, the perk would always provide a 150% speed boost no matter the tier. However, the length of this speed boost was variable. At tier 1 it was a 3-second speed burst, while at tiers 2 and 3 it lasted 5 seconds. But then, what was the difference between the tiers 2 and 3? Well, this part is kind of confusing, so I'll try to explain it as best as I can. If we take a look at this picture from the DBD Wiki, you can see that it says Tier 1 instantly heals from injured state, Tier 2 instantly heals from injured state, Tier 3 instantly heals from injured or dying state. Yep, that's right, if your perk was only level 1 or 2, you wouldn't get healed from the dying state. Keep in mind that at this time, Adrenaline also didn't have the luxury of waiting for you in the case that you were disabled at the time it should take effect. For example, if you were on the hook when the exit gates got powered, your whole entire perk slot would virtually go to waste. Now, you might have noticed that the original description for Adrenaline didn't mention that the perk applied the exhaustion status effect upon activation. Well, yeah, that's because status effects were not even a part of the game back then. This essentially meant that Adrenaline had no major downsides, and that you could freely pair it with Sprint Burst without the fear of Adrenaline screwing over your 99 Sprint Burst. All of this, however, would later change with the introduction of patch 1.5.0 during early 2017. This is largely known as the first status HUD update in DBD, as it added proficiency indicators as well as the first ever status effects in the game's history. And among all of these new effects was of course exhaustion. As of this update, all existing speed boost related perks, those being Balanced Landing, Sprint Burst and Adrenaline, would cause the exhausted status effect upon being used. Now, although Adrenaline afflicted you with exhaustion, the perk would still activate regardless if you were already exhausted at the time of activation. But this wasn't the only change to Adrenaline that was made in the 1.5.0 patch, as the following line was also added to the perk's description. Adrenaline is on hold if you are disabled at the moment it should take effect, and will activate when freed. This was, in my opinion, a pretty nice quality of life change, though I won't argue that it significantly buffed the strength of this perk. Now, remember that old design philosophy that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago? Well, yeah, that made sense since back then there weren't that many perks in the game, and the fact that some tiers had their own abilities sort of justified the whole grind. But slowly but surely, more and more perks started getting implemented in DBD, and this principle of design was becoming a little outdated. Thankfully, right after Freddy Krueger and the associated A Nightmare on Elm Street DLC was introduced, Adrenaline received some fairly noteworthy changes yet again. First of all, the duration of the speed boost was finally standardized to 5 seconds across all tiers. Second, Adrenaline would now heal exactly one health state, no matter the current state of the survivor. These changes were pretty nice, as they made the perk a lot more consistent and easier to understand for new players. However, there was another addition to this perk that in all honesty wasn't very good. See, during the 1.8.1 update, Adrenaline was now made to wake up sleeping survivors from the dream world upon activation. Now, I know that in terms of lore, this makes sense. I haven't watched any of the movies, but I think a friend of mine said that in the movies they injected themselves with adrenaline in order to keep themselves awake, and that's cool, but adding this feature to the perk when Freddy was already not the best killer doesn't make much sense to me personally at least. Especially when you consider the fact that after the killer's rework, another perk also started directly targeting Freddy's power, that being small game. This was overall another kind of odd design philosophy, where specific perks or items were designed to counter certain killer powers. Okay, so throughout all of this time, more and more people were starting to realize how powerful adrenaline could really be. And a lot of killer players were becoming very frustrated with seeing multiple survivors get instantly healed as soon as the last generator got completed. The main problem was that adrenaline couldn't really be countered in any significant way. Since the perk ignores exhaustion, the speed boost was completely uncounterable. The healing could be countered by inflicting the broken status effect, but this effect wasn't and still isn't very popular to this day, as there aren't many things in the game that inflict it. However, with the eventual release of Chapter 25 Project W, a brand new perk was introduced which was in fact a direct counter to adrenaline. Can you guess which this perk is? Yep, that's right. It's called Terminus, and I remember that at the time of its release, it seemed like a big deal to most players. But now I rarely even see anyone running this perk, and according to nightlight.gg, it has a very low pick rate of a little over 0.6%. Anyways, I got a bit sidetracked there, so let's get back into the video. Recently, with the introduction of the new 7.7.0 update, Adrenaline received a couple of nerfs. First, the duration of the speed boost was decreased from 5 to 3 seconds. Furthermore, the perk is no longer put on hold and activated retroactively if its user was disabled at the moment of the exit gates being powered. In addition, the effect where adrenaline would wake you up from the dream world was removed, as it was quite unfair that this only affected Freddy's power, and this also brings the perk more in line with the general shift away from effects that target specific killer powers. Overall, in my opinion, these changes are fair, and I'm glad that they didn't nerf this one to the ground as they have done with others in the past. In my humble opinion, adrenaline has always been a perk that is deserved, as, you know, the survivors worked for it, and I think that the main problem with it is mostly to do with the fact that if multiple survivors use this perk, they can get insane value from it. But yeah, what do you guys think about these changes? Let me know down in the comments. Well, I guess that was it. We went through the whole history of the Adrenaline perk in Dead by Daylight. I know that Adrenaline is by far not the most controversial perk in DBD, but honestly I just couldn't think of a better title, and so I apologize for it being a bit clickbaity. Nonetheless, I hope that you all enjoyed this video and that you learned something new from it. If you did, then make sure to let me know by clicking the like button, and also I would be glad if you would consider subscribing as well. Anyways, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!
Woo!